I'm thrilled to welcome our two speakers today, Biz Stone and Dame Carolyn McCall. You probably know their backgrounds, but just in a little quick bio. Biz is best known as a technology company founder, co-founder of Twitter, Medium, and Jelly, angel investor in Slack, Square, Pinterest, been developing large-scale social systems that facilitate open exchanges for the last couple of decades. He's also an author, a filmmaker, a philanthropist, a visiting fellow here at Oxford. He's on the board of the Foundry, and his honors include Time's 100 Most Influential People in the World, the Economist Innovation Award, and Vanity Fair's 2019 Global Goals list. Biz rejoined Twitter full-time in 2017, and fun facts, he holds the patent on Twitter with some other folks. One other folks. So, Dame Carolyn McCall has had a storied career in lots of organizations which you've either read about or listened to, or flown on. She's currently the chief executive of ITV, which she joined in 2018. Before that, she was chief executive of EasyJet and previously held various commercial and management roles at the Guardian Media Group, including its CEO. Other background, school teacher, and started in construction, of all things. In 2016, Dame Carolyn was awarded a damehood for her service to the aviation industry, and previously received an OBE in 2008 for her service to women in business. So what a remarkable set of people, and we are fortunate to have them both here today. So just a word about ground rules. I will ask a set of questions over the next 25 minutes or so. Then I'll ask them to ask questions of one another. And then at about 20 minutes before we close, I will ask the other room to send their questions in. So if you're in the other room, hi. Thanks for joining us in the overflow room. There'll be sheets of paper where you can write your questions down and send them in. And then it's open to you. And when it's time for questions, if you could identify yourself, make it a question and make it short. Okay? So anyway, welcome. So let's get started. And I prepped them on some of these questions, but not fully. So we're in a world of STEM, science, technology, and engineering, and mathematics. But both of you started in STEAM, as it were, the A, which is arts and humanities. Biz in art and graphic design, and Carolyn in history and politics. So how do you think having a background that is not in the STEM subjects, a background in arts and humanities or in politics and history, affects the way that you think about managing?
Well, I started out as a designer, and design is all about choices and communication. And I think one thing I've learned is that communication is more than 50% of the job when you're talking about leadership. Even when you're communicating the bad news, it's really important. So there's that, and then I just think one of the things I learned from design is that creativity is an infinitely renewable resource. There's really you can't use it up. So in other words, there's always going to be another approach, a different solution, and you just have to find it.
In politics and history.
So for me, I think I just loved those subjects, and I liked them when I was in school, and I think that was my first, when I understood that actually you excel at the things that you really enjoy. And then I think history and politics they give you context. So for me, context is very important, especially in media, but in anything. And I think also it's analytical, actually deeply analytical, whether it's history or politics, and you're making judgments. You don't always know what is true in history and what isn't quite true, but you are making judgments about that. And I think that's has been very useful to me. And then it's about people, actually. Both history and politics are about people, and that innate curiosity about wanting to know more about situations and people and why they did certain things in certain times, I think kind of helps you a lot in business, because actually, as Biz says, actually running large organizations, and it is actually all about people. If you don't get the people part right, you're not going to get the business part right.
And I imagine in EasyJet there were a lot of engineers, and there's in Silicon Valley and in Twitter a lot of engineers. How do you think about the differences that they bring to a team and how it is that what you bring to a team? Because in both of the settings, it's very diverse, but not in the way that we think about diversity.
Well, I mean, I think one of the most important things is to have everyone aligned on the same purpose. So one of the first things that I did when I came back to Twitter after taking a break was realize that we had never actually stated our purpose for being. You know, people, if I asked around, you know, what do you think, why do you think Twitter exists? What's our purpose? Not our mission, because missions are either completed or failed, but purpose, an enduring thing. People were like, freedom of expression, you know, so nobody really knew. And so one of the first things I did was I articulated a very clear purpose statement for Twitter, which was, we serve the public conversation. And I didn't realize how meaningful and how impactful that would be. It was like iron filings to a magnet. Everyone suddenly realized, you know, what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And we also, you know, very quickly realized that Twitter is not very good at serving the public conversation. So the product team all of a sudden had a lot of work to do. So I think just having a universally accepted purpose is a great unifier of you know, across any field of endeavor inside the company.
Carolyn, across three, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, completely. I think that's, you know, in EasyJet, there were engineers and pilots, and pilots are a particular type of individual because they have the safety of a whole plane in their hands, and they also, they're not always from a STEM background, but they are frequently from a STEM background. So, and what I found is that actually they were very easy to communicate with as long as you were open and direct and completely kind of transparent with them. So there was no point trying to package something for an engineer or package it for a pilot because they'd see straight through it. So, you know, actually, and it's the same with journalists and it's the same with program makers. So the thing that I think links that is when you respect what they do, I mean, the engineers at EasyJet were some of the most innovative people I have ever met. And when you celebrate that innovation, which they're not used to, they just flourish. They really come out of themselves and actually innovate more. And I think that communication, having a socially cohesive purpose, so making travel easy and affordable for EasyJet. If you're at ITV, I think, you know, everyone at ITV understands that we are engaging millions of people. We're helping brands succeed, but we're also shaping society and influencing society positively. And I think all of them, whichever area you're in, kind of coalesce around that. That's really important.
So I warned them that I was going to ask a wild card question. For those of you who come to many of these, this is not a question you will have heard before. But as I've been reflecting on the news in the last few weeks and months and years, this is a very Oxford question, which is Hobbes or Rousseau? So for those of you who know what the question means, you know, Hobbes thought that people were basically brutish. Rousseau thought that people were fundamentally good. And everything flows from that. Hobbes, by the way, for those of you who want to understand, went to Magdalen, which might explain a lot about that college. So Hobbes versus Rousseau, what's your worldview?
Well,
I think we're going to say the same thing.
Yeah, mine is that people are fundamentally good, and if you give them the right tools, they'll prove it to you every day.
I agree. I mean, I think people are fundamentally good because that's the way you get the best out of people. If you start with a positive attitude and a positive approach, you're accessible. I always felt that I wanted to make every place I worked, even when I was quite junior at The Guardian, when I was running a team of people, I wanted them to come back from holiday wanting to come into work, not dreading coming into work. So everywhere I've been, I wanted to create an environment which treats people as if they're fundamentally good. And I think that's how you get the best out of people. I mean, if you're going to go for flexible working or, you know, trust is an incredibly important thing. So delegation, trust in people. I think if you don't think they're fundamentally good, you don't do any of that very well, because you're constantly trying to control it.
And we're not
When we started the company, one of the things, I gathered everyone together and I made fun of Google, and I said, at Google, because I worked at Google just before Twitter, and I said, at Google they had a motto of "Don't be evil," which I thought was hilarious because you're starting and you're going negative. It's like you could be terrible, mean, horrible. You could be a jerk. Just don't be evil, which in itself is subjective, anyways. And I said, why didn't they just say "be good"? Isn't that better? And so I said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be good. And so that's how we started with our culture of volunteerism and philanthropy and so forth. But like many a thing invented at Twitter, it started out as a joke.
Okay. So
we had a lot of fun at work.
We're not going to talk about politics, but we could reflect on whether we think most politicians are Rousseau or Hobbes, but we won't go there. What people came for today was the content wars. So let's talk about content.
Content wars.
The societal roles and responsibilities of media organizations today. But let's talk about where we are. This overused word convergence is happening, which is to say that your business and your business are quite distinct, but they are, parts of them are moving closer together. Your business is moving closer to, well, entertainment and also media, and in addition to the public discourse, and what you're doing is moving. So where do you see, first of all, where do you see we are right now? Just kind of benchmark us as far as where you see, convergence, and if you want to focus on content as a marker of that, in terms of these businesses colliding.
Mm-hmm.
We're all about conversation and getting people to converse in public, and a lot of that happens during events, and events very frequently are popular television shows, especially television shows where it's not narrative fiction, where you want to get lost in that world, but reality television, where it's like where it's okay to kind of chat with your friends while you're watching the show, and that happens a lot during. Twitter definitely plays a role while people are consuming television. We've noticed that over the years.
But less narrowly, the Twitter business of engaging conversations has also made it, well, how does it relate to journalism?
Oh, how does Twitter, we define Twitter as what's happening, what people are talking about. And our purpose is we serve the public conversation. But I've long thought of Twitter as one of the world's largest and most influential news agencies. Journalists get a lot of their news from Twitter and a lot of their sources from Twitter. A lot of the conversation on Twitter comes from the news. It feeds itself. So it's very much, Twitter has always, in my mind, very much been related to news, because news is what's happening and what people are talking about. And it's either news made via Twitter or news somewhere else that's being talked about on Twitter. So they're very intertwined. You can't separate them. It's one of the reasons why Twitter is, ever since we started it, I don't think there's a day has gone by where it hasn't been in the news. And that's not because of us. It's just because someone was tweeting about it, or someone somewhere was tweeting about it, and they just throw Twitter in there, and we built a very, very big brand long before we could back it up, I think, and a lot of that was due to news and information and just being included along with that.
How do you see convergence, Carol?
So I think this is the age of the viewer, really. This is like a golden age for viewing.
Oh, yeah.
Because there has never, ever been so much content, and there has never been so much choice.
I love TV.
So I think if you're in content, so ITV has a large production company, it's ITV Studios, makes a huge amount of content, and is a very profitable business in its own right. And then we have our network, which obviously broadcasts a lot of content. But a lot of the biggest kind of shows in the UK are made by ITV but put on other channels. So we're doing that already. So Bodyguard, Line of Duty, There's just a whole ream of them. So I think that for the view, it's really important, I think, at the moment for established media companies like ITV to reframe how they look at things. Because if they continue to look at things as only free-to-air TV, putting content out to a relatively passive audience, that only does one thing. It doesn't really do all the other things that it can do with that content. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us, but I do think technology is changing everything we do. So we are going to set up a streaming service, as you referenced earlier on, called BritBox with the BBC and Channel 4 and Channel 5. We're very interested. Never heard of before for broadcasters in the UK to come together. So it's hugely collaborative. Lots of people want to undermine it and make sure that, they say as much negativity about it as possible. But, bluntly, it's something we have to do. It's a different model. It's a very distinctive product. It's all of our content, past, recent, and commissioning new stuff. It's not Netflix. It will never be Netflix, and it's not trying to be Netflix.
But is it a subscription?
It's a subscription based, so it's SVOD, so it's subscription video on demand. So, it's important for us to do that. By doing that, it's not saying that we won't be free to air for a very long time to come, because if you actually look at what's going on, live audiences are very, very difficult to come by in any medium except TV. So if you've got a big sporting event, and there are, the cricket board is currently lobbying to be on free-to-air. The rugby won't take it off free-to-air because of the large audiences. If they go behind a paywall, they get much smaller audiences, but they'll get more money. So it's just very interesting, because I think over the next few years, you will see free-to-air still being very strong, as long as free-to-air broadcasters can create those live moments of both reality, entertainment, and sport that delivers these quality, large audiences at the same time, because no one else can really do that. But I agree with you that actually the way my kids are watching content on telly, what was telly, how they're watching it is different, and they are either tweeting or they're kind of they are communicating with other people while they're in a room with other people all the time. So it's made that engagement a very different kind of engagement.
But why couldn't Netflix or Apple give away part of their content on free-to-air?
Because it's not their model. Because their model is very much, I think, about growth, global domination and growth, actually. Well, true, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Global.
just funny to heir you say it.
And I think their model is just very much based on a subscription model where they're not, their audiences are not critical to them in the way a subscriber is critical to them. Whereas if we don't drive those audiences, we don't get the advertising revenue. So it's a really important thing. So I think it's a model that kind of serves them well, and they've got it cracked. It would be strange to see them unravel that.
Yeah, like they like to own the whole circle.
And so the future that you see is there's a coexistence between a Netflix and Apple, and then your business and other businesses like yours.
Yeah, but our business will have to change to adapt to the changed world of how people are viewing. Because, Netflix had a long time as a DVD business, as everyone knows, before their pivot was, okay, we're going to go this way. And they created a demand that people didn't even know existed, which is on-demand viewing. Well, all of us are going to have to, we do that now, and we're going to have to do more of that. And we're going to have to judge how much is free to air and how much is behind a paywall, because people are willing to pay now in a way they just weren't willing to do before Spotify and Netflix. People would not pay for content. And that has changed fundamentally. And that gives us an opportunity, but it also means that we have to learn new skills, new competencies, and data and analytics is a really important part of that. When I joined ITV a year and a half ago, we didn't have one data scientist. We've got quite a lot now, but it's a big change, right? Big change.
Let's pick up on that, data and AI. One of the big hot things right now, you've just introduced it, is data analytics. And obviously what people use Twitter for is a lot of data analytics. You've just joined the foundation board of the AI Foundation, I think I got that right?
The nonprofit.
The nonprofit, sorry.
They have a for-profit and a nonprofit, yeah.
So What are the limits that you see about how we can and shouldn't use data? Twitter data, other data?
Well, it depends on, I mean, if we're talking about people's personal data, I think that the rule should be my data belongs to me, and I should know what it's being used for, and I should be allowed to have access to that. I should know what it is. I should be able to edit it. I should be able to opt out because it's mine. Like it belongs to me, and that's how we view it at Twitter as well, and it's why we let people go into their settings and say. Because Twitter is, you know, you don't have to sign up with your real name or anything like this. We infer from your public tweets things about you, and then we tell you what we've inferred about you, and you can either go in there and correct it or make it better if you want to see more relevant sponsored tweets, or you can just say I don't want you to infer any of this stuff about me, but we show it to you. And that's how we do it.
People can sign up anonymously for Twitter?
Well, actually, I shouldn't have said anonymous. What I should have said was pseudonyms, because people, you know, you can be like Darth Vader is on Twitter, right? And he's been on there for years, and he's hilarious, and he's built up this great following, and that's different from some random account that pops up today with no profile picture that's just mentioning someone 100 times an hour. That's clearly probably harassing somebody. But pseudonymity is important because there are a lot of places in the world where a service like Twitter is the only way that a person can speak truth to power or get news out. I mean, one of the first things. Well, there's lots of, but I think suffice to say, it's important that people be allowed to not share the real name if they don't want to, because in some places in the world it's really dangerous. And it comes down to building up a reputation on Twitter, and we've recently moved to, I'm going on and on here, but we've recently moved to analyzing behavior because there's no way we can scale to actually monitor the content of the billions of tweets and take into context what this means in Arabic. Is it a joke? Is it an insult? So we've recently taken to analyzing behavior, and it turns out that looking at thousands of behavioral signals will tell us whether or not content is likely to be healthy or not healthy. And we can, now that we've moved to an algorithmically ranked timeline, we can use these behavioral signals to push the content that's likely not healthy down the stack and instead present content that we think is probably more healthy. And this is done by machine learning, which is getting better and better every day. Of course, people can always toggle. There's a switch to toggle to real time to see everything, because during sporting events and things like this, people want to see what's happening right now. They don't want to see an algorithmically curated timeline. That was a lot more than you needed.
That's okay. In the businesses you've been in, you know, the ITV, and I'm thinking ITV and The Guardian, how do you think about this question about data? Who owns it? How you can use it? How you can monetize it? Where you have to stop?
So very carefully. So actually EasyJet was the biggest user of data.
Okay.
Well, we had all information on passengers,
Yep.
including passport details data, but I mean, because they have to give it to you. So we're very careful in our use of data, and we did use it well, because we were able to kind of say to people, if you want us to give you information about where your next destination might be, or you've been going to the same place, we could tell when people were going, you know, it's about patterns. Mm-hmm. If you want to know when the flights are going to be the cheapest, we can tell you. That kind of stuff, I think, is very welcomed. And I think at ITV, well, we're highly regulated for a start. So, you know, editorially and advertising, we're totally regulated. So we are people obviously opt in, you have to opt in, but we're quite transparent about the way we'll use that. And at the moment what we're doing, we have a huge amount of viewer data, but actually the data that really matters is the 29 million registered users we've got on our hub, which is our online offering, where we can get back now, because of AI and a whole load of other technology, we can now get back what people are actually doing online. How we've used it, and will continue to use it, is to improve what we do for them, target them if they want to be targeted about. So if you love drama, telling them that the next drama, and reminding them, sending them SMSs, all obvious stuff, but actually quite welcomed by your audience, actually, really welcomed by the audience. We might also sell things to them, but they tend to be in the ITV stable. So we're not really using it for advertising. Now, we will go down the route of targeted advertising. We've just done a deal with an ad tech company, and that will change what we do from an addressable advertising point of view, a targeted advertising point of view. But again, it will be done very carefully and with permission, right? So people will know that this is what is happening to them.
And you started.
It's kind of different, I think, for us.
You started by saying you're heavily regulated, and I sensed that there was a parenthetical that was missed out as compared to.
No, I mean, I just think I wasn't making comparison with Twitter or Facebook.
No.
I genuinely wasn't.
Okay.
I was saying a lot of people from other countries won't realise that in the UK, broadcasting is heavily regulated. I mean, it's not just a light touch. It's every single advertisement that appears on screen is pre-screened, right? Is seen before it goes on. Editorial content is heavily monitored, right? And it has to be compliant or it can't air. So it's a very different ecosphere, really, to what exists in social media.
Now, Carol, when you took this job, you were interviewed, and you said at one point that you rested easier at night because you didn't have to run a safety company anymore. Yeah.
Can I clarify what I meant by that? Let me just clarify that.
Yes, please.
I think when you're running an airline, it's on your mind all the time, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, you are not, as a CEO of an airline, you do not ever put your phone very far away from you. You are on all the time. You don't really go on holiday without your phone being on, because if something happens, you are the person that will be called on, right? And when I say something happens, I mean an accident, which would not just be, it would be terrible, right? So you are always aware of that, and in fact, you have to be very, the regulator interviews you every 6 months about safety standards and safety regulations. So it's a very different kind of beast, if you like. Of course, we are responsible for the safety of our viewers, of participants in our show. Of course we are. It is a different kind of safety to what I described about an airline.
Fair. And that's where I want to go.
Because I was going to use that, I think.
Sorry. There was an expression that I learned when I was a child, which is sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. On the other hand, your business is both traffic and words, and they can be dangerous. And both of your organizations have experienced this. So how do you think about, beyond the legal requirements that you're under, your responsibilities about monitoring the non-sticks and stones that come across the Twitter network or across ITV?
Well, right now our number one objective in the company is safety, and first and foremost actual physical safety, because we have found that the online can transfer to the offline, and so that has to be sort of job number one for us. And then on top of that, what we're trying to go for is a healthy public conversation, and that includes making people feel safe, making people feel safer, especially marginalized groups who experience much more abuse than non-marginalized groups. And we've really stepped up this is something that we didn't anticipate this when we built Twitter. I mean, we thought about spam, but we definitely didn't anticipate filter bubbles and the manipulation of those filter bubbles by other states in order to in order to anger people and incite people and create real world harm. So in the past year, that has been, the past more than a year, it's been really top of mind. And as I said before, before when we were running Twitter, we put all the burden on the people who use Twitter to report when they were being abused, and then we were like, well, we're going to get more serious about this. Let's give them more ways to report, and that we just put all the onus on them, and that's putting more onus on someone who's already feeling like they're not safe. Finally, we said, wait a minute, we're a technology company. Can't we use technology to try to get more proactive about this? And in the last year, going from 0 to now 38% of abusive accounts are suspended proactively using machine learning tools, and that's going to get a lot better, a lot faster, because every minute machine learning gets better and data scientists get better at their jobs. So this has been a boon for us, because making this switch to using technology and being proactive rather than reactive has made a lot of difference in helping people feel a lot safer on Twitter. We've experienced a lot less abuse complaints, etc. So.
And as a content provider, broadcaster, and news outlet, how do you think about safety as something that's on your mind?
So I think we have a duty of care. We are highly, as I said, there's compliance, so there's strict rules about what you can and can't do. But as a broadcaster, you have your own duty of care policy and procedures. And I would say that we have that for our journalists in the news organisation, for both international and regional news. But we also have that for any member of the public that comes on one of our shows. Now that ranges, so you have an overarching duty of care framework, but if you are on a quiz show with Bradley Walsh, the duty of care will be applied differently to if you are doing a reality TV show for 8 weeks in somewhere else, right? There's different levels of duty of care. And I think one of the things that is very striking is that and there's no blame here in any way, but what has happened with social media, some things you describe when you talk about Twitter and the trolling and the kind of abuse and the hate and all of that, we have had to really kind of wake up to that, if you like, as broadcasters, which is if you're doing a reality show in particular, the social media kind of 24/7 swarm, if you like, puts those people often under a spotlight that was never before, right? And this is a global thing. This is not just about the UK. And therefore, I think broadcasters have to be very mindful of that. And so, for example, what we're doing now, because of the social media intensity, is we're training participants of, say, Love Island on how to deal with social media pressure, how to deal with media pressure, how to deal with, things like financial management, what happens when you come out, counselling. So we're proactively offering counselling. We will keep in touch with all of those contestants for 14 months afterwards. They will have sessions to keep them so to make sure that if they are being trolled, they talk about that, we help them manage that. We can't stop that thing happening, but we can help with our duty of care, and we can make sure that is extended for more than a broadcaster would have ever done before.
We can stop that thing happening. That's the goal.
But that would mean you and Facebook and you see what I mean? It would be a whole,
and
all of you would have to do that.
And this is an area where
that would be great.
This is definitely an area where I think there shouldn't be competition. Safety and for example, safety, maybe philanthropic endeavors, these types of things. Twitter does work with peer companies and organizations cooperatively on things like law enforcement, terrorism, things like this. But I'd love to see that extended, and just to see, just have a more open dialogue on these things where it's a win for everybody. Like it shouldn't be a competitive advantage for one company to like have a secret sauce for keeping something safe. All the work we're doing on safety, we're doing out in the open, and we're planning to share with anyone any service that feels that they also serve the public conversation, whether it's a newspaper or a social network.
I have a lot more questions, but I promised you each a question to one another. So, Carolyn, your question for Biz, and Biz, your question for whoever would like to go first.
Okay, so if you were a TV company in the States or the UK,
Yes.
what would you do?
Oh.
Now, given all the content and consumer kind of explosion, what would you do?
If I was a TV
Like
company,
a broadcaster, like an NBC or an ITV or BBC or anyone.
man, I'd be like a kid in a candy store because I love narrative fiction. I love movies and television. I would spend a lot of money on really good content, and I would greenlight shows that show a positive future, like Gene Roddenberry. I really do feel like, to a certain extent, life does imitate art, and the more we can show 8-year-olds, 12-year-old girls and boys that, like, hey, here's a really cool show that ends up with this world of cooperation amongst citizens of planet Earth, and also it's cool to watch, instead of all sci-fi, which is currently all dystopian nightmares. I challenge anyone to find a sci-fi show right now that isn't overturned smoking cars, and first of all, that's cheap too. Like, I don't like that because it's just like a cheap way to do it. Yeah, zombies and flipped over cars from the 80s. But so I would spend a lot of money on shows that that present a future I would like to see, so that the young people make it happen. And I'd probably do other stuff too, because there's probably other things associated with the job.
Yeah, probably.
Make a little money from now.
Sort out advertising.
Yeah, sort out advertising. Maybe make it subscription so that we don't have to have advertising and product placement. I don't know.
Okay.
Your turn.
Oh, if you ran a TV company, no.
I told you already. I've already told you that bit.
What was I going to ask? I was going to ask you.
I did prepare them for this, by the way.
I want to ask you two things. First of all, why don't you tweet?
That's so unfair, because I told you.
But you didn't tell them.
Because I'm not allowed to as a CEO.
Not allowed to. She's not allowed. They're silencing her.
In the United States to tweet? No, sorry.
Well, you know.
They're not allowing her to tweet.
Okay,
How can that?
that's not fair. You had inside information on that question.
Okay, so next question. What's your favorite narrative fiction TV show?
It'll be ITV, all right? Anything.
Anything, anyone.
Genuinely, I'm an avid.
All time too. It
viewer.
doesn't have to be currently on.
There's loads, though. I think there's loads. I mean, I do.
Have one favorite. You can't.
Honestly, because I was brought up in India. So I was brought for 16 years of my life. I didn't live in the UK. I lived in India. So my exposure to British TV was actually quite limited, which I'm really looking forward to BritBox, because I'll be able to catch up with quite a lot of the shows that I missed. But I mean, I just like drama. I like drama.
So what? Yeah, so what do you like better? Do you like drama? I mean, do you like narrative fiction or reality TV, or do you like them both equally? Or
no, I think probably, if being really honest, it would be narrative. Always fiction, because I'm a big reader. I love reading. I love books. So I love narrative fiction.
What are you reading now?
What are you reading now?
I'm reading
Sally, Normal People. That's what I'm reading now.
I'm reading Once Upon a Time in the North by Philip, Pullman.
Pullman, yeah.
Okay. All right, now it's over to you. We have about 18 or so minutes, questions from the audience, and we should also have some questions from the other room. So if you can identify yourself, short identification, short question, and let them answer. And what I think I'm going to do is I'll take like 2 or 3 at a time, and then they'll bunch them.
Okay.
All right? Do you guys need stuff to write down?
No, you'll just remember
relying on you.
All right. So we're going to do 3 at a time. Let's start 1, 2, 3. Starting with you, and then you 3.
Yeah, hi, Eduardo Suarez from Reuters Institute here at Oxford. Just a quick question for Bits. Why haven't you banned the President of the United States from Twitter?
Okay. Next question.
Hi, Annem van Wyk, also from the Reuters Institute. If you're talking about things that you want to see on Twitter, why are you showing me fringe figures from South Africa that I didn't choose to follow, but they now pop up on my timeline saying the most outrageous things?
Okay. Third question.
Hi, I'm Isadora. I'm an MBA student here. I've been tweeting since July 2008, and I've witnessed quite a fair share of abuse in that time. So I'm just curious to hear from you, Biz, what keeps you optimistic about people are inherently good? Because I imagine you witnessed more abuse than I did on Twitter.
Okay. Sadly, they're all for Biz.
Okay.
So why don't you ban Trump? How come I'm seeing fringe figures? And what keeps you awake? And how you're dealing with abuse? And
So
let's just do quickly, please.
we don't ban world leaders because we have a policy that's called newsworthy or in the public interest. We think it's important that people see what these public figures are thinking and what they're saying on purpose, and also that people have an opportunity to respond to these things. With regard to the next question, why are we showing you stuff that you don't want to see? We're still working. We, as I said, we recently switched to an algorithmically ranked timeline, so we might not be getting you right. It sounds like that needs more tuning. It may be that we don't know enough about you, that you don't engage enough. I'm not sure. I'm not in charge of that algorithm. So I don't know. The answer is I don't know. Probably we were not doing a good enough job at finding you the right stuff. And then the third one was about abuse. One thing I just want to note about abuse is that a lot of people don't realize that there's a spectrum of Twitters. There's multiple Twitters. For example, there's politics Twitter. Everybody knows about that. There's NBA Twitter, there's K-pop Twitter, there's Black Twitter, there's Native American Twitter, there's disability Twitter. There's a Twitter for like almost anything that you're into. And if you look at K-pop Twitter, they're having a blast. Like they are loving the time they spend on Twitter. Journalists mostly cover politics Twitter. Politics, the world over right now, it seems to be in the most, discourse-wise, in the most toxic it's ever been. And Twitter being sort of a microcosm of the world and what the world is saying, then politics Twitter naturally is also, has this kind of discourse. And because journalists mostly follow politics Twitter, it tends to get painted with this brush. That isn't to say, as I said before, marginalized groups, minorities, often see the bulk of abuse as well. But I just wanted to make that note that there are a lot of different Twitters where people don't have this experience. But this is, as I said, our number one objective is healthy conversation. We want people to feel safe. The safer they feel, the more they'll tweet, more people will come to Twitter and tweet. So it's very important.
3 more. Let's see. Let's go on this side. These 3 across the line. We'll come to the middle next.
This is a question for Carolyn. Do you think with the launch of BritBox and other streaming services like Disney Plus that actually more choice for everyone leads to a net decrease in consumption?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Look, I think we're all in competition for attention. You know, I don't think it's about... I think people will have multiple subscriptions actually going forward. Therefore, if you're free to air in some part of your business and an important part of your business, you are just having to compete for attention, so it better be really good. So I think actually it raises questions about what's the place of a schedule. You know, it's important for advertising, it's important to certain viewers, it's very important for certain viewers, but how you manage that in the future and how you construct that in terms of competing for attention is going to be really critical. So it is all about just having the content that is going to cut through. But then, in addition to that, I used to think it was just about the content, and it so isn't, because you can be on, we are currently on 28 platforms already, right? And in the future, it could be 300 platforms, right? So it's going to be about how we communicate our content and bring eyeballs to us in a very different way to the way we've done it before. So it's about context, but it's also about distribution as well as the content you have. It's not just one thing anymore. Everyone used to say content is king. Right, okay, content is the single most important reason people come to you, but they have to discover it. So discoverability is going to be a really important factor going forward.
That brings to mind, what's that expression when there's too many things to choose from, then people choose nothing? There's like a...
Overwhelming choice, something like, Hobson's choice kind of thing,
Sometimes I feel that way.
I think people are overwhelmed by choice, and so that's absolutely right. I think that comes through in research.
There's too much on.
So it's like, okay, so therefore you have to make it simple for them, which is why discoverability is going to be so important.
So I know I said you could go next, but this question actually fits from the other room. This is for both of you. Is there a point when you'd like people to use less of your product and look beyond their screens?
Yes.
Never.
No, we actually are. We're looking at what do we want success to look like for us, and ideally what we would like to have people do is to check Twitter multiple times a day and come away having learned something or have a laugh, but not necessarily be staring at it all the time. Just, quick, short bites of information where you've learned something new that you didn't know before, or it's amusing, but not that kind of engagement where, yes, they stared at the screen for 8 hours. That I don't think that's healthy.
What's the average Twitter user screen time?
I don't know.
So the average TV viewer watches about 3 hours a day on average, right? So there's big variance there. I don't think telly is like that. I mean, I think streaming could be, because you could get into binge watching. Yeah. And, I think everyone who has binge watched kind of probably says to themselves, shouldn't do that too much. And I think, you self-regulate. I think there is something quite addictive. Sorry about this, but I do think Twitter, I go on it. So although I don't tweet, I am on Twitter. So I think it is quite addictive. Actually, it's very easy to get completely carried away by Facebook or Twitter in a way that you just don't do that with telly or content that you're watching in a scheduled way. Right? You might watch 2 episodes, 3 episodes, but then you kind of go, that was fantastic, thank you very much. You watch the news and you watch something after the news because you think, okay, I'm here anyway. But it's not quite as... So that's why I say never, because actually I think people use content on telly for a number of different reasons. It's for escape, it's to learn, it's to kind of... the news is really important. We're a very trusted source of news. That's very important. If you live regionally in this country, ITV regional news is more trusted than any other news source. That's very important. That community thing is very important. So it's kind of bringing people together. And the other thing we do, I think, which is really to be encouraged, is it's shared human experience, which you don't get when you're looking at a phone or you're looking at a small screen. It's a really human connection when people say, I really want to watch Britain's Got Talent. 10 million people do that every Saturday night. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. So I think more of that, really. More of that.
And they share, they watch that and they tweet about it.
Yeah, they tweet all the time. Yeah, it's true.
Over to you.
Thanks very much for your time. Mark Lee, MBA student here. Saw probably a question relevant to both of you, the attacks in Sri Lanka over the Easter weekend. I know the government were criticised for shutting down social media. Just interested to know whether you welcome government intervention or you believe in free speech.
I do believe in freedom of speech. I believe the freedom of speech is a fundamental human right, but I don't believe that freedom to have your speech amplified by Twitter is a fundamental human right. I mean, I guess the second part of the question would be, we comply with law enforcement and all over the world. I mean, we're not going to break the law. So
maybe to take some of that, how does a legitimate news organization think about fake news and how you differentiate? Or I'm just going to pick up the theme and maybe.
So I mean, freedom of speech. I mean, I work for the Guardian and ITV, so I mean, freedom of speech is a fundamental right, and I think that's incredibly important. But I think also it's if it's inaccurate or not, it's fake, then I think you are in a different ballgame. You're then dealing with a problem. You're not dealing with freedom of speech. So I think that's the way we would view it, which is if you give people freedom of speech, you know, we have this mainly with sources, right? You get a source, you decide whether to run a story or not. You have to believe in the source. If the source is flawed, then you could be broadcasting something that is inaccurate. But we would go through a lot of tests before we would run that story, and we would go through a lot of lawyers before we would run that story, unlike social media, where, you know, it just is an instantaneous kind of hit. So I think we have a lot of checks and balances and safeguards. It doesn't always work, right? But more than often it does. So I think that would be my answer to freedom of speech. And I think the mainstream media, look, the reason we are trusted is because we have journalists there, kind of on the spot, looking at things with their eyes. They are actually witnessing situations. So if they are reporting on something, normally there will be someone they can verify things with. Whereas social media they just don't have that. They're just taking stuff and repurposing it, if you like. So I think we would run a story where we say, this is what is being reported, or here is a video that is being reported. But we wouldn't always say that it was true unless we were sure it was true. Right? We would report on a story about something like that, but we wouldn't verify it unless we knew it was true. So I think that's the distinction. And I think that's why, genuinely, ITV, BBC News is highly trusted more than any other kind of news organisation in Britain. It's right at the top of the pile.
Great, we'll try a couple more questions. Center now, you two, and then you.
Hi, Hugh Thomas. I was an MBA student here last year. Fake news and false information aside, people often have lots and lots of biases and paradigms that cause them to misinterpret and very often badly misunderstand true news, right? So they come away with beliefs that are totally unhelpful. Without stifling free speech, how can both of you help to maximize true belief so that we can make the world better faster? Outside of necessarily, well, it could be using Twitter or ITV, or outside of those vehicles.
Okay, so just the summary, how to make the world better faster, is that
by maximizing true belief.
Okay, all right, so let's do 3 questions. That's 1. 2, there's a microphone up there. Actually, no, you have a microphone in your hand. Why don't you go and then you can follow, please.
Yeah, a visiting fellow at the Blavatsky School. A question for both of you on the media landscape. John McElwain, in charge of Bloomberg last week, came back to Oxford. He conveyed a sense of optimism that after so many years of fear of traditional media's decline, now with this New York Times, FT all go to paywall, they feel much better now. Caroline, do you feel similar sort of optimism right now, also going into the subscription model? The Netflix is part of the story, what's others? And the natural question to ask is it going to be going into a winner-takes-all society also in the media sphere? Because you mentioned you want to spend a lot of money. That's only something that top players in each segment can do. Thanks.
Okay, third question.
Hello, I'm Selena Chan. I'm an MBA student and a banker. My question is, here we in Oxford, we are very passionate about tackling world-scale problems. What more can media do, say Twitter or ITV, in helping solve some of the biggest problems in our world, such as, I don't know, education, poverty, or say, medical and advancement?
Okay, so to put the three together, we have how do we make the world a better place faster, and help people understand true beliefs. How do we make the world a better place through combating world-scale problems? And what's your feeling about a sense of optimism and willingness to pay, and in terms of where the media industry is? So, Carolyn, you want to start?
Okay, so making the world better faster. I think that parochially, I would say for ITV, we've got to be much better at news online. We are woefully bad at that, actually. You know, if you look at the BBC and what they do compared to what ITV does. So, and our news is it's different. It's different because it is more community-based and because it is more regionally kind of facilitated, if that makes sense. We also kind of try and explain things in a very non-patronizing way. So I think there's a real place for that in the world, and I think that ITV News can do much more online. It is not really a presence or a force online. I was very involved with The Guardian, going online for news. It's now a top 3 news website, right? So I think there's a place for that. I think also we've got to get to the young. And at the moment, I mean, I have 3 kids, right? They're all teenagers. They tend to get their news from social media feeds. And actually, when I say to them, yeah, but how do you know it's all right? And they go, oh, come on, Mum. It's so obvious when it's fake. It's actually not that obvious, but they think they know. So if you know, news is expensive. It is extremely expensive to run a news organization because it's dangerous in some ways. It is deeply investigative sometimes, but you have to cover the ground to do news well, and we do that. So if we don't reach the kind of even the 8 to 15s and then the 16 to 25s, and they're only getting it through social media feeds, that's not good for the world. So I mean, Michael Jeremy, who's our director of news, is really, really good at what he does, and he's now thinking about what we can do for that kind of audience, because what comes across from all research groups that we do is that they think it's something for their parents. So ITV News is trusted even by that generation, but they don't think it's for them. They think it's for their parents. So we need to make something relevant for them because they already trust it. So I think that's something we have to work on fast.
And optimism around paywalls and
Optimism,
stuff like that?
Yeah. Well, okay, so the thing is, ITV has come a long way because currently, 5 years, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, 100% of its profit was advertising revenue, right? And today, 65% of its profit, roughly, is advertising revenue, right? Still a lot. I think that is the issue for me, which is it's cyclical and there's a bit of structural. But it's cyclical, it goes with the cycle, which means that if you're in a down cycle and you are trying to change the business quite fundamentally to that future, it makes it much more difficult. And that's kind of where we are today. So it may be that the economy numbers look okay in Britain. Actually, what's going on is companies are not investing. They are very worried about the situation politically and economically. So everything is slowed right down. That's very difficult for an advertising funded kind of model. So I think I'm optimistic longer term, but I think we have to navigate our way through the next 2 or 3 years in terms of transforming the company in the middle of quite a difficult economic climate.
Oh, okay. So
true beliefs.
So to answer the first question, I think I don't know if this gets edited or not, but the way we designed Twitter originally was you follow a person, and then people tend to follow people they agree with, and then we recommend people you probably agree with as well. And this has the unfortunate effect of creating like a filter bubble or a distorted reality where like your truth is the only truth. So I think there's things we can do here. One such thing would be maybe you don't just follow people, maybe you follow a subject. So if you follow Brexit, then you may get people you agree with, but you may also get people you disagree with showing you another side of the story. And I think so showing more sides to the story, I think, is a really important way to get at that. What was the other? Well, the next question was just about subscriptions in general.
Can I so that means that if you're in support of vaccinations, you should show people a lot of anti-vaxxer stuff.
Actually, what we do specifically with vaccinations, now that you mention it, when people search for that content, we automatically show expert medical. We put up expert medical pages. We don't point them to other people with things like that. It's the same thing we do with suicide and self-harm. We point them towards places to get help. We recently also, with this vaccination stuff, we're giving them medical truths, which is part of safety. The other thing was about subscriptions.
You talk about subscriptions.
I love subscriptions. Media, I'm on the board of Medium. It's a company I helped co-found, and about a year and a half ago, we decided we're not going to be in the advertising business. We're going to be a subscription-based model, and that has worked phenomenally well. And one of the reasons I love it so much is that it unites profit with purpose. The more people subscribe, the more money we can spend on journalism. The more money we spend on journalism, the more people subscribe. It's this beautiful circle where everything just gets better. So that's great. And then with regard to Twitter, we make, I think it's 86% of our revenue from advertising. And we're very keen on creating a much more diverse stream of revenue. Because that's a durable stream of revenue. That's an enduring business right there. The more varied it is, the more we can weather the ups and downs. So that's something we're working on.
Great. Let's do one more, and then I'm going to have the prerogative of the last one.
Hi, I'm Mina. I'm an MBA student here, and I'm curious to know what about your respective businesses keeps you up at night, and not with respect to daily operational mishaps, but more managing the longevity of the value you can provide moving forward.
Well, so for me, I mean, aside from safety, real safety concerns, I think the long-term existential threat for Twitter would be to lose its credibility. And so it's very important that we maintain the really healthy win-win relationship we have with journalists on the platform. And it also means that we need to look at verification in a different way. Maybe verification isn't something that's a permanent stamp. Maybe it's something that's more fluid. This person is on the ground witnessing this right now, so they're a verified source at the moment. And then that goes away later. I'm just talking out loud. I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to be a feature, but the thing that keeps me awake in terms of the long-term credibility, long-term existential threat type of thing comes down to credibility. We can't have people laughing and saying you must have read that on Twitter, because it's absolutely not true. That's something we have to constantly be vigilant about.
Carol?
So for me, other than the unpredictable nature of what can happen on a show, it would be, have we got the speed and agility and adaptability? Are we quick enough? Are we moving quick enough? Are we changing things quick enough to be able to adapt to a very, very changed media world? That would be the big thing for me. That keeps me up.
Since our audience, a lot of them are students in our MBA program and others, think of them as 28-ish. What advice would you give your 28-year-old self?
Well, my general answer to that is I don't want to mess with the timeline because I really like how everything turned out. So
How about these 28?
I think I'd just stick with all the mistakes because I have a great wife, I have a great son, I have a great life. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, to y'all, I would say just to find good people who are also great, and when you are lucky enough to find those people, stick with them, and they'll make your life a lot better.
Carol, last word.
Yeah, I think I would say if you don't have a plan, don't panic. Because I think a lot of people I talk to who have done actually things they really want to do didn't set out with the kind of, this is what I'm going to do by the time I'm 30 or 40. Or, they just, things can evolve, and taking advantage of opportunities are really important. So whether it's about working with people you really want to work with or changing something where you really want to make a difference, EasyJet for me was an opportunity. I mean, I never ever thought I'd run an airline and turn it around. I never thought that. But actually, it's probably been one of the most fulfilling 7.5 years of my life. So I think it's kind of choose the right people, choose the right cultures, and then make a difference. But don't panic if you don't have a kind of plan of where you're going to be.
I think that's great advice. Can we say thank you to our two great guests for today?